I was at my grandma's and it was dark. The world was distorted and weird. Outside, there was a massive red centipede, and I ran after it with a brick and smashed it. I took up the brick for some reason and brought it inside. Then aliens started coming down. I went to the backyard against the fence, and the aliens sent down Ben Shapiro, look-alike alien, and I had an alien gun to kill it. I was riding this car through the mountains, like Halo, and I was floating in the car, going near airships, and aliens were all around the ground with plasma turrets, kind of like Halo 2. Riding this train near a junkyard around to a town. Eventually I get off for this bike that looks like a big tire. I went into the mountains where they had animals and restaurants. I was eating inside one of the mountains. I actually hit the wall and it was wooden, so I went right through it and there were lions everywhere in cages. I broke through the next door as they were getting out of the cages and I was with people. The door took me to this mansion with a ton of overhead wooden planks. I climbed with the people to get out of the building. This building was kind of like a huge white and red mansion. Hard to describe it, but they were staircases. I went to a small store. It was like a Dollar Tree almost, and they sold TVs towards the back, and there were a lot of people. We were driving down to Arkansas, and we were in Illinois with my granddad, Aunt Becky, and Aunt Bev, and there were a ton of factories alongside the road. We stopped in a town, and in the town there's a restaurant-themed bar and grill with a pool table. The table we sat at was long and big, and we were eating food for a bit before a celebrity walked in across from us and everyone went to him. I was in a hallway outside of a huge church trying to talk to my aunt. We all went inside the church, and there's a glass enclosure surrounding this wooden church. Then the lights started to blow up outside, and glass was falling. Then the lights started blowing up above me. Glass was coming down really hard, and I started recording it. And then I was recording this baby doll that started talking and laughing. I was running room to room trying to escape the lights from coming down from exploding. I kept getting hit, and I was still recording at this point. Then I think I went to another church and started talking to this huge guy about how I feel cursed. I wanted to mention archangels and maybe magic, but I ended up talking about how I was a huge fan of Ed and Lorraine Warren from their movies. Was in a high school, or probably my middle school actually, and everyone was fixated on the end times. So Timmy, my uncle, Becky and Bev, and I were all hanging out in the afternoon, talking about Thelema and the Book of Enoch. The time came and the apocalypse didn't happen, so I was carrying around a huge piece of wood in the hallway and I tried to shape it like a cross. In the school, I was also on a mountain. I was at my home with my dogs and my parents. They left, so I cleaned my room and played Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1. It was storming really hard. I live streamed myself playing on an HD webcam. I was in a forest. Kids were playing soccer up the hill, but I was with two other people just sitting around in lawn chairs looking out towards the trees. The kids started coming down and asking if we were okay. I was nice to them and they eventually left. At my aunt's house, and a ton of cars were there. Someone buys the land and we evict a huge party that's happening. And I go to some other land I own and I notice on my phone that someone needs help. So I go towards the sewer to help people out, and the walls are like science fiction type stuff. We went to a friend's house near Battle Creek, an older guy and his wife. His house was flooded, so I was helping them clean it. The floor fell in on me and made me super wet. I ran upstairs and helped them get video games and their cat. That was a really interesting dream too, because it was like the house was really intricate and it was like based off of like a ton of video games I like, so that was interesting. I went outside and someone was playing The Lonely Island really loud, but the song didn't exist. It was a laid-back LA themed song and the title was in French. I think the title was like La Fruit the Ag or something like that. The video was them in a bus in a really R&B type lighting, riding around LA and singing really relaxed like in a rap. It appeared with Steve-O. Steve-O takes famous stunt people on a Ferris wheel and interviews them. He met an Evel Knievel type guy. Went to my aunt's house and my dogs were messing with me and chewing up my shirt sleeves. I was in my town and on Twitter, and I started talking to this guy, and he came over to me in real life, and he invited me to his house, and he was heavier set. He took us in, and it was a big and beautiful house, so I started taking pictures, and his mom had all these plates out for a party. Everyone was coming over. There was a party, and the back of the house was just a huge basketball gym, like with an lounge area in the far back, and family was all there. The lounge area looked like a bar. Like, it was a really interesting place. It had a flat screen TV, and in the backyard of this house, there's also a graveyard. I forgot to mention that in the dream journal. My granddad was there with Robbie, and I took a photo with my granddad, but he got hurt, so he had to leave immediately. I went to the lounge, and the kids started playing baseball, and hitting balls right near my face, almost killing me. I left and went to my granddad's, and my grandma and my granddad were there, and they were both in deep confusion from their age, and they were acting extremely weird and almost alien, throwing away random things and giving me food that wasn't properly labeled. I was at home looking outside. Some guy started going through my mailbox and took out all my packages. I went outside and took them from him. He got pissed and kept begging me to give him one. I kept saying no. He was pushing me about how he wanted a video game. I told him to spend $30 on a used console instead of stealing one from me. When he left, I opened my mail and it was mostly just dental floss, mints, and some weird toy. I went to a Motley Crue concert and I seen Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters. I went in walking around the crowd, then went to the start, or back to the start, and went in and sat at the very front. I made friends back at home. They took me to their school, and we sat around while they introduced me to their hierarchy, and they were talking about my cemetery shirt. This dream was actually a really interesting dream, really intricate dream. The school was like really cool, but it's hard to even explain it. It was like an orangish school. I don't know. Back home, after I took everything inside and the bush in front caught on fire, my parents lost my dog, my black Pomeranian, and my granddad was there too. I hugged him and I promised we'd hang out. I was riding through this distorted town with a cell building that looked like a bank, but it was a single room for prisoners. I was going to the dollar store getting drinks and food like chocolate bars, and they had a drive-through. I also got a bag of gummy foods. That was a really interesting dream. It was like a single room, and then there's like a pharmacy in the back, but it was a dollar store, and it had a room leading up to the pharmacy. My parents took me to a restaurant that was really old looking. It honestly looked like a picture. I was taking more pictures. It was really nice looking. A bar in the center, a wall behind the bar, and against the back wall some booths. Booths in the front as well. No windows, wooden aesthetics everywhere. So, wooden paneled walls. I think the floors were like linoleum or whatever the big squares are, you know. But they had American food, normal American food, breakfast mostly. So in my dream, a restaurant got tore down up the hill, and it was replaced with a car mechanic. The car mechanic was throwing loose parts at the building, so when you went outside, it was really dirty and ugly. So we went to the mechanic, and it was really big, and they had a bottle cap as its mascot walking around. It was turning colors like green and blue and singing songs, or green, blue, and red and singing songs. And then an old friend called me. She invited me back to the restaurant, and she wanted me to hang out, so I hung out with her for a while, and eventually I pissed her off. She was really mad at me, so I kept apologizing, and when she didn't forgive me, I made the restaurant shake with my mind. And I also made all her clothes hanging from like the ceiling fall, and it scared her really bad. So she kicked me out, and she had a ton of my stuff. So I had to get my grandma to get a car to pick up all these old books, pictures, and even blankets. The boyfriend of the girl was a cop, and he was being super weird too. I was going through the drive-thrus at some restaurants on Bow Creek, and I dreamt they were making a film about Harmony Korine being a super pretentious meth addict. In my school with my friends, we went to a few classes, and everyone was making fun of this guy for being a murderer. At my grandparents' old bar, they had ice cream buffets and bikers, and I also met Kanye West there. This was, definitely not my grandparents' old bar, but it was supposed to be in my dream. Okay. My grandma was drawing illustrations for books. I was in a high school, and it got snowed in, and it started to rain, so I didn't leave the school. It was a really disjointed and weird school. Rooms were small enough for 2 people. I remember this dream. I'd say just a small group of people could hang out in a certain room, but it was like a long hallway with just rooms on the left, and yeah, it was interesting. It was more like a video game because there was like a lot of war-torn cities and stuff in this dream. Oh yeah. I was playing video games with my uncle, and all these games had really intriguing levels. I went to a church and ate snacks, and there was an open can and ants were crawling in it. This church was like at the bottom of a hill, just open, land. And I was hanging out with a guy from a bike shop in town, eating breakfast with him and drinking coffee. We were studying Burroughs, climate change, and I was listening to post-punk in school. The Burroughs, climate change, and post-punk were all in the school. And I had my Allegory Chapel CDs in school. We were traveling, and we stopped at a restaurant where there were 2 places. I went to get coffee at one place, but the line was too long. I went to the other line and worked my way in, and the place was on a body of water. It had a guitar, and the guitar had a huge knife on the end. I just got back on the road, and I was out of my seat in the driver's seat. And I was kneeling on the floor where the car just went, and I got into my seat eventually. I was on a spaceship where my room was predetermined with turrets and a bed. Robots started coming out of the doors on the bottom floor, so I had to defend the place with turrets, but my room looked ugly and pieced together with wood and metal walls. I was in a grocery store trying to get my pants, and I just washed in a washer in the back left of the store. Outside was a 2-story pizza place, red building, and I was getting pranked by the staff. And a guy came in violently vomiting milk, slipping on the floor, and squirting out of his nose. His name was Jackie Cool, and he was crazy. Yeah, I think in the dream, his name was like Jackie Cool. It was like a Jack Stauber type vibe going for him. And he had a song playing in the background, and it had like whispers, like some old cop drama or something. And it was just like saying he's Jackie Cool. So that's an interesting one. In my granddad's with Uncle Mike. Goodwill, I bought White House CDs. I was at a strip mall parking lot, and someone gave me a coupon for a car. I was going into different strip mall side buildings too, listening to Lil Ugly Man playing BioShock in my childhood room. An old man was watching me play. My friend Dakota from school went viral in elementary school when a light busted over his head and he tried to fight someone because of it. There was a haunted house ride in a theme park I went to. I filled a motorcycle gas tank up with hand sanitizer, and I was in a game shop looking through magazines and vinyls at a strip mall. In my basement cleaning up. Uncle was there, also Joey and Liz. I was dressed up, and I was looking through photos, and rain was coming in through the windows. I wanted to go to Arkansas, but I never went. I had a game we were playing, like trivia or something. Also, a lady let me rest on her. I was playing Serious Sam in real life, and there were wooden and foreign corridors like the ancient China levels of Next Encounter, but more small and claustrophobic like a Wolfenstein level. There was also a slope into a pool room. Going through a drive into a dark room, my car kept backing up, so I couldn't stop at the speaker. I got out and started climbing walls. Okay, the drive-through speaker, sorry. I got out and started climbing walls. Joey was there, my brother. Went near Walmart, got online for it, and grabbed a wallet in a secret compartment in some box. I was in a town, and the buildings were wooden and old, and there were also alcohol bottles, and the world was a first-person shooter, and the place was like a saloon. Okay, that was an interesting dream. It was like a multiplayer Call of Duty level. Or like a multiplayer Medal of Honor level. You know, back in the day, the earlier games. So I took a taxi into town and started getting drunk, and I accidentally spawned giant worms, and the only way I could defeat them was through prayer and smashing a white glassy spot on the ground that was their heads. I don't know about that one. I was at my aunt's and Bev was there. I woke up and brushed my teeth in her room. I got into an airplane with this guy and had a ton of clothes for him to change into. And I kept making him change into police clothing. Then I was throwing him out of the airplane and he kept coming back. Slowly, he started getting used to it, and the airplane turned into a hallway in a school/apartment. And I met Chief Keef. His mom or grandma was there too. I was outside my old elementary school, but it was really artsy themed. There was a glass roof and sharp brick pillars going upwards. I went to this old rich guy's party, and he seemed really evil. He bought a ton of gross, cheap food, and every time I'd try anything, I'd spit it out and throw it away. This guy's house looked like a church's, place of eating. Really, really interesting place. He was in this house that was really large in the dining room, but there's a kitchen. I hung out with my cousins, and they were both talking with me about the IRA. We went to the store. It was like an Aldi's, and there was all these really unique people around. The food looked awful, but the chocolate looked really good, so I bought a ton of chocolate, and then they made me do like 5 surveys just to buy the chocolate. I went to the store, and was hanging out with this really old evil woman, and I wanted to buy this thing for a kid because he wanted string cheese or whatever, but she wouldn't let me buy it. She told me that he didn't need it, and I yelled at her for being mean to the kid. When I was walking back, this guy was sitting down playing music that sounded exactly like my old music. I showed it to him, and he agreed. He was playing Suicide Factory, like my old Suicide Factory album, which was like a noise album. I was driving on this really claustrophobic street, and I stopped to let people cross. I eventually kept driving, and the road turned into a very high up sidewalk, and I had to get off. I went further down, and got on a lift that put me back on the sidewalk in this car. Next, I went higher up on this other lift, and the world became a documentary, and a nuclear bomb went off, and it was talking about how meat would cook in its plastic containers. The world was like Doom, and it was modded to be like zombies in new maps. The new maps were really claustrophobic hallways, and there's a deathmatch map. They said it was based off of Turok, but it looked like a Quake map. We went to Indiana, and we went to a film critic's warehouse. He had a very messy place, and he was talking about movies. I had a Blade Runner keychain, and I talked about Tim and Eric, and I looked at his candles and papers. Outside, we walked through fields up to a house we were supposed to be staying at. We went to this bald guy outside, and we were talking to him. He is a Christian who owns the house next door. He said he wanted his TV facing down so the lights would go onto his books. We walked around until night, and Liz got scared. We walked back to the house, and dogs were everywhere. We went into the bald guy's house, and the wooden front porch had a hot tub. We went to my grandpa's, and his house had weird people in it, and I was sitting in places that probably upset them. I was in my house looking through photos of me and Boyd Rice and Lisa's suck dog. Liz's grandma picked me up, but I had nothing, and we were going to Indiana with absolutely nothing. I got mad. She started screaming at me, so I asked to be dropped off back at home. I was at my grandma's trailer, and I went out to the old shed looking for stuff I was missing. I found a toolbox, opened it up, and baby spiders started flying out. Then all of a sudden, a jumping spider jumped out and slowly turned into a cat. This girl came in, and she started hanging out with me. She would hug me and listen to music with me, and my grandma eventually called her grandma, and she came over and was judging us. I was at this weird school, kind of like the entrance of a nightclub. The second in command guy gave me LSD. I took the first LSD before class and then after the first class, and the main guy comes out trying to sell weed. Him and I go upstairs together to this room full of candy, clothes, and bikes. People from school started walking in, and we had to get them out. It was against the rules for them to be in there. The place was gated off in a huge white open room. It even looks like it went outside in some parts, but it wasn't outside at the same time. It was like a Matrix room. Okay, I was in this room with this guy, kind of like binging with Babbage, but he was into fashion. So all these people came out, and we were working on making them look good in this cramped little room. I eventually left and started walking down a mostly empty street with restaurants and these open fields. Then I went to an extremely steep hill, and there's a Walmart, and I was trying to get to, but I got stuck on the hill. My granddad's house was a mansion. His main room was huge and open, but I went upstairs and mostly hung around this warm room where there was heating in it. It was full of children's toys and toy guns. My great-grandma gave my aunt a shadow box with small trinkets, and my grandma wanted a burger. My mom was trying to fix a computer. In my dream, I was at home. Liz left for Indiana to work on a film that takes place in a fantasy setting in a castle. I stayed at home to help my dad, and he's mad at me a lot. And he's keeping live fish in the sink. He offers to watch crime footage on DVD, so I grab my speaker. The world turns into a Tony Hawk game, and I'm skating around town with a ton of city bricks that look marble, kind of like those back areas in the levels of Thug 1 with the competition, but with quarter pipes are taller than the buildings are very tall. I went to the house, and it was really dark. There's a man inside, and he had a wife. I couldn't get inside. He locked all the doors. The garage was open, and his car was running, and then I told him to turn it off. The garage caught fire and burned down his home. I was on a road with all my stuff piled into a car full of notebooks and paperwork, and all it flew out of the car onto the road, and I had to collect it. There's a TikTok song about a pink Power Ranger, and it was really bubblegum pop style and awful. Was in the woods, walking on a wooden bridge after playing pranks at Myers. There's a huge, mostly abandoned house with an Xbox and a PS3 that's still working. I'm looking for the bathroom. A ton of people come in to use it before me, but I started noticing a ton of rare stuff. I grab a ton of paper sleeve CDs with Tumblr-style photography on them, mixed with folk artist called Blood Folk that was Southern folk, and the covers were all black and white. So I started walking downstairs, and there are a ton of a room full of designer clothes and kids' toys. And there's two teenage girls trying to grab all the kids' toys. I offered help. They told me to leave, so I left. I went down to the basement and found an Autopsy Band VHS and the cassettes by them. I also found controversial cassettes from Filth and Violence Records and a box set for Growlsome. I was taking a ton of noise and power electronics, and at the end of this, I saw Monty Kazaza. I told him I loved him and I loved Deviation Social. I grab all of my tapes, boxes, CD sleeves, and start to leave while the house starts filling up with prostitutes. I was in a bar watching a girl sing, and then I started working at the bar. I had a camera that took pictures of people who didn't buy anything. It would turn into a really large open area, and I was carrying food and drinks to people, and some had towns with trailers and some had cabins. I dreamt I went to Las Vegas, and my room there was a bunker with a huge opening wall that looked like a parking lot. It looked very science fiction-y, I guess. Like a Fallout bunker, I guess. I was there with my mom, dad, and Liz, and I was driving down the road with my mom and Liz, and in the car next to us, a devastating car crash killed 2 children, and further up, it also killed a girl in a wedding dress. Also, there was another body in a red car down the street. There's a graveyard we passed with cool Halloween-themed building that handled funerals, and it was really long and kind of run down looking, but there were chandeliers inside that had an orangish glow. I dreamt I was at my granddad's, and my great uncle was the person who ran Nintendo during the classic NES era. My dad was on a ladder looking into my room in the winter, really early in the morning. He waved a lighter until I saw him, and then he jumped backwards into a snow pile. I went downstairs to check on him. He was winded and could barely move his right arm for a bit. We went inside, and my mom was crying about Kid Rock being harassed by Papa Roach. She was also crying because of Donald Trump. I went upstairs and grabbed my clothing and charged my phone until around 11 a.m. Then I walked to his school. I had a cemetery shirt on, and I kept my charger because my phone was really low. I walked into school, and it was more akin to a prison. It had brick walls and hallways with dead ends. I went into one room, and it had all these bridges and candle altars on the wall, and it had a spiral brick wall going down the hall. I talked to this woman, and she was like a lunch lady, and there were 2 cats. I started exploring the hallway with Liz, and the bridges started falling apart. Liz and I came to the conclusion the room was haunted. It slowly turned into a forest. I grabbed a tree branch that had little dots that had letters. It spelled something out. Where these old military men came in with swords, and they were upset at themselves because someone was murdered. A guy with long black hair, a mustache, and a white long jacket was found to have the haunted sword, and he was brought to a church where his hands were cut off and he slowly died. I was in a mall going through a DVD rack looking at bootlegs. The shop started changing around, and CDs were everywhere. And then it was implied that the CDs had novelty band toys, is what I picked out in an app like Discogs. I went into a back room where I changed my name. I was sitting there trying not to lose my mind, and everyone in the room was trying to pick apart why I changed my name. I was talking, but they were talking over me. So I talked over them and said, "Because I feel crazy right now, you stupid piece of shit." And then I started picking up my clothes, and while they were begging me to come back, I ran away through this huge mall. It felt like I was going in circles with the escalators, and eventually I found this one location that was a massive movie theater. There was a hidden seat behind a big shiny metal thing where I hid my body behind. I stayed there until I was curious about the movie, and it was some kid's movie about a very surreal spider. It looked AI generated to an extent. The girl saw me and started taking me away. She was like a mental health person who took me away because I lost my mind. I was guided upstairs, and there was a CD on the wall. There was a mixture between Miley Cyrus, Britney Spears, and Madonna, which I picked up. The girl led me to a place in the mall where no one was at in the middle. They set up chairs and they called the chairs monkey bridges or something like that because it was rope chairs. I sat in one until I was so dizzy I couldn't even move. I felt all the blood in my head and I was really sick, lying on the ground. Then I was talking with her, asking if I could listen to Ernest Tubb because I wanted to listen to music. I had flashbacks of Ernest Tubb being really mentally ill, and then I was in a documentary for the rare acid death flower that was extinct. It was what acid bath based their name on in my dream, a type of mixture that was the most extreme way to experience LSD. I was driving through town and I went to a construction site and I was with someone who kept being scared and talking about bad luck. I dreamt my hard drive was failing from heat, so I put a fan next to it and transferred everything from it. A car tried to hit me, so I ran up a hill behind a church and hid some concrete stairs that went down. I was wearing a dark throne shirt, and these girls started talking with me about Grausamkeit. Diot Darling was there, and she hung out with me and became my best friend. We talked of Crowley and read book 4 with a class. She brought me a ton of peeps and cupcakes and wrote Liz and I letters when we went to Harding's and she went home. And she said stuff like we were really authentic. I was going to bed and cops started coming in and the military, so I had to fight them off. I was in town after school at a hardware store and the world was really confusing. I was at Menards after the school transformed into Rhodes. I was in an antique shop, like a house mixed with a warehouse, gray carpets that were sloped and stairs everywhere. I got CDs and DVDs. I went to a bookstore that sold DVDs and it was wooden, and they had a lot of stairs as well. I was in Manhunt in a gym/basketball court and everyone was chasing me. And it was slow and really not entertaining. Slopes on each side, huge indoor black building. I was hanging out with a girl I know, and she was sleeping next to me. We woke up and were talking for a while, and the world was changing, but I don't remember what it was changing into. We talked for a while before I started leaving for an airplane trip. The airplane looked exactly like my grandma's trailer, so I had to move my stuff out, and they were mad. They found my knife and blamed one of my friends. And then they found my SPK book with the anti-psychiatry, and they tore it up and blamed an old friend of mine again. The cops came and handcuffed me, and I said, "You have the wrong person." They kept taking me to the car. I got to the car, and they said, "Is this your name?" Showing me my old friend's name, and I said, "No, you have the wrong person." And the cops let me go. I went inside, and my family was there. This was at the trailer, but my grandma, Bonetta, was there, and she was going room to room with me, talking about who's in the house. And my granddad was there. My grandpa was there, and my granddad was hiding.